I'm back. This is Ray. I'm coming back with a Mockingbird in the Crow's Nest, Chapter 3 and 4. We're starting off with Chapter 3. My roommates are apprentices. And don't forget to check out the creator, Little Bit of Sunny. Awesome creator. She gave me permission to do this thing, to podfic this. Very awesome. Be sure to go and read the tags. There are 37 chapters here, but be sure to go read the tags. Thanks before you listen. Okay, let's get started. Once Phil sent Tommy away with Puffy to give him a quick tour, George stood in front of his spot on the floor and stretched out his limbs. It was scary how easily the man could pretend to sleep when he wanted to. Of course, the entire room minus Tommy knew George wouldn't actually be asleep, but he was pretty damn convincing. Phil shuffled the papers he and Tommy had filled out together and stuck them in a binder as the man approached. He looked fidgety. When he lifted his goggles, his eyes were conflicted. That wasn't good. "George," he prompted quietly. The man bit his lip, glancing towards the door that Tommy and Puffy had gone through several minutes ago by now. "He's not acting right," he whispered, making Phil pause. "He's nervous, jumpy." He shook his head. "I don't know. It's not right." Phil frowned. "He's new. It makes sense that he'd be nervous around us. It'll take time for him to adjust." George shook his head. "That's not it. He's cagey. Like he's afraid of being trapped. Like if he makes a single mistake, his life is in danger." Phil took a deep breath, glancing in the direction Tommy had left. He noticed something off about Tommy as well, but not at first. But he couldn't miss the way Tommy would wince when stepping in the elevator. Like he wasn't 100% sure he'd be able to get out. The way the kid stood like a soldier, like he was meant to be seen, not heard. The way he kept his face blank and tone neutral, like he was meant to follow orders without question. It was a bit unsettling. It made Phil feel like Tommy was being watched by unseen eyes. And it made him want to go find those eyes and tell him to knock it off so the kid could actually relax. In fact, Phil would argue the only bit of real relaxed Tommy any of them have seen of him was when he teased Wilbur. When he cracked a crooked smile and called Phil's youngest son a boomer. It was endearing. And the way Puffy had lit up at the display of his personality had been any indication, his fellow board members felt the same. Tommy just needed time to adjust. He needed time to understand he didn't need to be a robot. That he could and should be his own person. Have his personality. And he could have his own thoughts and ideas without the threat of being in trouble. "And his fighting," George continued, unaware of the thoughts flitting around Phil's head. "I've seen a lot of different fighting techniques from the academy. And what that kid didn't do any of it. And typo. It looked like he genuinely believed he was fighting for his life." Phil had noticed that as well. The way his hands shook, his eyes darted around like he needed a fast escape or was planning for a makeshift weapon in case something happened. It reminded Phil of Techno when he first started to foster him. A 13-year-old kid with angry powers he couldn't control. Always looking to escape an unseen fight. Always scanning the room for an out like he was 2 seconds away from being shot at. It made Phil's heart ache and it sent a ripple of unease through his wings. "We'll keep an eye on him," he reasoned, glancing over at Sam, who had just nodded in agreement. Although his tail was flicking around anxiously, we just need to make sure to make him feel welcome. Have some patience with him. That seemed to ease George a bit, but he still didn't look convinced. "I'm not giving him my identity," he said, a bit quieter. "Just not yet." Phil nodded. "That's your right, George. My team and I don't plan on showing our identities either, not till his official debut." That seemed to put him at ease, and he relaxed completely. Then he pinched the bridge of his nose with a yawn. "I'm way too tired for this." He nodded. He then pointed a finger at Phil with a glare, but there was no heat behind it. "You owe me, you know. Those energy supplements go down like soggy chalk." Phil shivered at the description and bumped his shoulder. "Thank you, George, really. I'm sorry you need to eat one of those, but I really need your memory at this." George rolled his eyes, but he was shadowed by another deep yawn. Yeah, I get it. Now, if I'm good to go, I can hear my bed calling my name." Phil laughed and nudged him towards the door with a wing. Go on and get some rest, mate. I'll make sure you and Dreams are up for dinner tonight. The man hummed in acknowledgement, tugging his thick, mossy cloak over his shoulders as he practically glided out of the room. Phil stayed behind Sam, and they just settled together as while Sam showed him the rough blueprints of their brand new staff for their latest apprentice. Apparently, when you're hired as a hero, you're offered a condo. At least as the captain said, it was more like a dorm, but it still counted. It was still much more than what Tommy was expecting. Tommy would be sharing a living room and kitchen with 2 other people his age, but he'd have his own bedroom, a closet, and a bathroom. Again, that was much more than he was expecting. He didn't have to do anything to fill the room or closet with, but he wasn't going to complain about a free room with easy access to a bathroom. But probably the most surprising part about all that information was that there's 2 other people he'd be living with. 2 other people his age. He's never heard of a hero his age at the tower, and he hoped there weren't any interns living in the tower. So maybe these were charity kids, orphans from bad situations the heroes took in for good PR. Hopefully Tommy could just silently exist in a spare bedroom and they can continue with their lives. Tommy doesn't ask or say a word when he's given a quick tour of some of the most important floors on the tower, where the offices are, what floor the warden's workshop is on, where the conference rooms are, where the cafeteria is, stuff like that. Apparently, there's also a game room in what the captain liked to call a small home theater on the same floor as the dorm Tommy's going to be staying in. That was nice, at least. He'd be able to escape the dorm and get some alone time if needed. They get to the floor and the captain shows him what the different rooms are on the floor. Apparently, this floor was mostly used for parties. There was a whole other kitchen and a bar covered in locks. The captain said the cabinets out there were always full, so he could just grab snacks or trash bags if he ever needed them, which was nice of her. After showing him the game room and pointing to the direction of the theater, she led him to the dorm room. Before they actually reached the door, though, the girl paused in her steps, and Tommy's eyes were on her in an instant. He watched her as her ears flicked nervously and stiffened instinctually. You're not allergic to pets, are you? Cats, dogs? He shook his head. No, ma'am. She relaxed a bit, and Tommy relaxed as well, as she laughed lightly. Thank the gods. For a second I thought we'd have to stick you on your own, she said, like it was a bad thing for Tommy to be on his own. And for a moment, Tommy's mind is stuck on that. Why would it be a bad thing for him, a stranger, to be housed alone? Wouldn't that just be standard procedure? Why did she sound upset at the thought of him being in a dorm on his own? He's not going to complain, of course. While he doesn't necessarily like sharing a house space with people, he's never turned down the opportunity to get his hands on information. These 2 new people might have and not realize. They walked a short distance to a room with a bronze plaque beside it on the wall, and it read Dorm 3. And under it was a note card taped to the wall that said Tubbo in scratchy lettering, and then the name Rambo written next to it in much neater handwriting. Yeah, definitely charity cases. Tubbo was a Loxodon name, and Rambo sounded like something you hear in the underground. He could work with that. The captain knocked on the door, and Tommy stood up, a bit straighter in anticipation, and there was a quiet, happy-sounding bark from deep inside the dorms. And it startled Tommy out of his thoughts. There was a shout of, "Coming!" from inside, and the barking stopped. There was shuffling, another quiet bark, and then footsteps approached the door. A guy, maybe a head shorter than Tommy, with bleached hair covering one of his eyes and standing in the doorway with a tank top and sweatpants. Instantly, Tommy's eyes flickered to his right arm, where there was a spider web of warped, scarred skin lacing over his shoulder and down his arm. And is he missing a finger? He only allows himself a brief glance so he doesn't stare, and watches as the guy's bluish-green gaze goes to the captain first and brightens, but then they catch on Tommy's bright red wings and they finally settle on his face. Right away, Tommy can see more warped skin decorating the right side of his face and trailing down his neck, right under his hair. But again, he doesn't linger on it for more than a second. But what he does take note of, though, is the goat horns curling around his head and poking back out under his brown ears, which are raised in surprise. The next thing Tommy notes is the heat that seems to be radiating off the guy. Fire powers, he assumes, and some damn powerful ones, too. A possible ally. Tubbo, Captain says, putting a hand on Tommy's shoulder and snapping him back to the moment. This is Tommy. He's a new hire. He'll be taking the 3rd bedroom in there. Hope that's all right. The guy, Tubbo, blinked a few times like he was struggling to come to reality for a moment. Oh, Tubbo beamed. That's good. That's great. Tommy was a bit taken back by his enthusiasm, but didn't have time to process before a hand was shoved in his direction. Hi, Tommy, He was cut off by a bark. A large Dalmatian came up beside him and panted heavily. Sorry for the interruption. Hi, Tommy, and he was cut off with a bark. A large Dalmatian came up beside him and panting heavily and wagging his tail as they watched Tommy, but not moving forward like a normal dog would. Tubbo laughed a bit. I'm Tubbo, and this, he rubs the dog's head, is Spots. Real original, I know. He laughed again. The dog barks again. Although it's quiet and he sits next to Tubbo at the sound of his name. We'll train, Tommy notes absently, smiling softly at the dog. Maybe a service dog? Is it all right for me to pet him? Of course, he's a service dog, so he won't bite. Knew it, Tommy thinks victoriously, extending his palm to the dog. Spot sniffs his hand for a moment with his tail thumping against the floor. Then he licked Tommy's palm excitedly and shuffled forward to get pets. Tommy laughed gently, kneeling down and scratching behind the dog's ears. Rambo is a cat named Enderchest, Tubbo said, glanced behind him into the dorm. Not sure where she is right now, but she'll make herself known soon enough. He waved, making a quick clicking noise that called Spots back into the dorm. Come on, boss man, let me give you the grand tour. Tommy bows his head to Captain. Thank you for showing me around, ma'am. And the captain gives him a soft but tired look. It's no trouble. Your sign-on bonus should be in your account by the morning. But if you want to buy anything before then, have Tubbo ram for it and I'll pay him back for it. Tubbo or Rambo pay for it, and I'll pay them back for it. He nodded, already dismissing the offer. All he needed now was a couple of changes of clothes, and he'd be good to go. He won't be staying in the hair tower long, enough to warrant a need for furniture, not when he had so much work to do, and make sure he did everything that was expected of him in both parties. But the captain didn't even know that. Thank you, ma'am. See you around, Tommy. She patted his shoulder and turned and made her way back down the hall. Tommy took a quiet breath before stepping into the dorm with his hands folded behind his back, and wings tucked neatly against his back as well. Spots circled his legs once or twice, 3 times as Tommy unfolded his hands to pet him. Only then did he stop circling his legs and paused to get his pets before returning to Tubbo's side. His tail wagging excitedly, the goat hybrid was giving Tommy an odd look, but he shook it off and grinned at him. This is the main hallway. We mostly just throw our shoes and shit against the wall. He just started taking his coat off a hook on the wall and pulling on it. And pulling it on. We also have reminders dotted everywhere. That's what the sticky notes are, Tubbo explains, pushing a NASA backpack against the wall and tucking a pair of shoes into a cupboard. Tommy hubs, nodding along as he glances at said notes and follows them after him. Take the trash down every Tuesday is on a green one. Written on a white one is cafeteria closes at 10 p.m. And then under that in rushed handwriting is Rambo can't eat dairy. And he assumes is Tubbo's scratchy handwriting. And this is the living room. Ignore all the junk everywhere. We keep forgetting to put shit away. He laughed nervously and picking up a couple identical flannel shirts off the back of the couch and throwing them into an open door. When Tommy glances through the door, he sees a mess of a bedroom with string lights hung up and an unmade bed of a mess of a desk, but he doesn't linger on it. The kitchen's over here, Tubbo continues, and Tommy follows him into a relatively clean kitchen. Rambo can't eat dairy without his medicine, so don't let him eat ice cream unless you see him take a pill beforehand. He tapped his fingers on the counter and thought, I have a kettle and a rice cooker. I don't care if you use them, just please clean it if you do. Rambo has a blender and a crock pot, same deal for him as well. As far as the dishes go, we just try and clean them as we use them. Rambo especially hates to see dishes in the sink, so I try to put my shit in the dishwasher whenever I use something. Tubbo furrows his brows. What else? I'm vegetarian, so if you have or cook meat, I appreciate if you packed it in and sorted it away from my veggies and fruit. If you want to use anything, you can. I just ask that you replace it or let me know. Tommy nodded and making a mental list so he doesn't step on unnecessary toes. Or hooves in Tubbo's case. What about you? Tubbo asked, starting a bit. I don't really eat a ton of meat because it makes me sick, he explained, stumbling over his thoughts for a response. So I get any, I'll make sure to store it separately. Otherwise, I can't eat eggs on their own. I can eat it when mixed into stuff, but it's not on its own. Tubbo nodded, graded a pink sticky note to write it down. Rambo and I are both pretty chill, so don't really need to worry about anything. Even the house rules are pretty obvious. He glanced towards a closed door. Speaking of, I should probably grab him so we can all go over that. Tommy nodded silently, standing off to the side with his hands still awkwardly folded on the counter when Tubbo turned to trot away. Tommy started to tap his fingers against the tower top to release some anxious energy. The goat hybrid moved over to the closed door and stood there for half a second before he was knocking unnecessarily loud on the door. Rambo! Get your ass out here! There was a sound of a crash from inside the room, followed by a yelp, and then there were footsteps, and a guy with long dark hair and a messy bun is yanking the door open. He looks panicked for a split second when he sees a shit-eating grin on Tubbo's face and turns sour. You, stars above, Tubbo, Rambo muttered, pinching the bridge of his nose, what looks like an ink-tinted hand. You scared the crap out of me. You scared Enderchest. Was that seriously necessary? Yep, Tubbo grinned. He arched his thumb at Tommy. We have a new roommate. I had to get you properly introduced. Rambo blinked, and instantly his hands flew behind his back, and the guy's surprised, mismatched eyes turned to Tommy. They made eye contact for maybe a second, but then Rambo's gaze shifted slightly to the left. Tommy doesn't chase his gaze. He starts quietly, nervously. Hi, I'm Rambo. Tommy nodded politely. Tommy. We need to go over the house rules, Tubbo explained, and you need to be out here for that. Rambo nodded, and Tubbo pulled some of his mismatched stools from the living room over the counter. While Rambo retreated into his room, there were only 2 stools. But that made sense. There was only 2 people living here. They wouldn't need a third. Besides, he'd rather stand. Rambo returned to his room, now wearing a pair of dark gloves, and sat on the purple stool beside Tubbo. So first off, bedrooms are off limits unless given permission. Tubbo starts. Knock before you come in, and don't snoop if the door is left open. Usual stuff like that. Tommy just nods. Oh, and before I forget, Rambo points and he follows his finger to a touchscreen tablet mounted to the wall near the counter. That is for emergencies only. It sends a distress signal to the hero board in case any of us are in danger. Enderchest is trained to send a signal just in case as well. Tommy frowned, confused. Huh? Enderchest is my service animal, he explains. He cleared his throat and put an awkward smile. I'm prone to sleepwalking. She's trained to hit the screen if something happens during an episode. Ah, Tommy thinks. That's a good thing to know. He'll have to keep an eye out for him at night. Make sure he doesn't hurt himself. He doesn't want the heroes to accuse him of hurting their charity case. And, if you wake up to Spots freaking out or barking really loud, I'd appreciate it if you went looking for me. He'll freak out when I'm having a particularly bad episode. Oh, that's far worse than he was expecting. Tommy nodded slowly and tried to think of a response to that. He felt weirdly guilty that they needed to give him the basics of what must be huge issues in order to justify having service animals, or to explain why they'd be acting a certain way. Tommy wasn't like that. He didn't understand. He needed to reassure them that he was a kind person. He didn't want them to be afraid that he'd laugh behind their backs or roll his eyes and ignore them when they weren't okay. Tommy may be a villain, but he wasn't a monster. He started quietly, noting how both of them tense up instantly, so he rushed to finish. I don't need to know your trauma to understand. I won't question anything or judge you if that's what you guys are worried about. I'm not like that. I'll keep my eye out, and he picked at his sleeve, and if you guys need anything, I can try and help. That seemed to be the perfect thing to say because both Tubbo and Rambo relaxed instantly. Tommy shifted his wings to readjust them from the tension that had just left the room. What about you? Rambo asked quietly. Is there anything we need to be aware of? Anything you're comfortable sharing so we can help you? I don't like anyone being in my room, he said, instantly digging his fingers in his sleeves. At all. Not even just to grab something. They both nodded, and Tommy thought for a moment. He also didn't really like being touched without warning, especially his wings, but he didn't really want to explain that. So instead, he kept that tucked away. Otherwise, I don't think there's anything else. I don't have anything aside from the clothes I'm wearing and a phone, so I don't have much to offer in terms of don't touch my shit, he joked. Wait, you don't have anything else? Tubbo frowned. No other clothes, no furniture. Tubbo shook his head. Tommy shook his head, and Tubbo's frown deepened. Well, then let's go buy you shit. Tommy blinked. What? Huh? Yeah, Rambo agreed, standing up with a smile. I'll go grab my wallet. There's a department store around the corner that's pretty good. And we can go to IKEA or some shit afterwards to go pick out furniture. Tubbo clapped his hands in excitement, and then after that we can grab dinner before we come back to the tower. It all works out. Wait, Tommy croaked, all overwhelmed by the sudden pressing of his wings into his back. That's not necessary, he tries. I just need a change of clothes and I'll be fine. Nope, Tubbo declares, hopping to his hooves and clicking twice, making Spots run off down the hall towards the front door. We're going together and we're going to buy you shit. We need to get you a stool for you anyways, he said like it was the easiest thing in the world. Tommy's chest aches. His mind is struggling to process, and his heart doesn't know how to feel but the fact that they're just accepting him and his presence into their home so willingly. Like these two have never encountered a bad person their entire lives. Like Tommy isn't a stranger. Like Tommy isn't an intruder. So he struggles to process. He just drifts around the apartment as Tubbo straps up a snug vest on his Spots, attaching a thick leash to it as well. The Rambo comes out of his room in a black and white face mask and a scruffy black cat with yellow eyes bundled in his arms, and Rambo introduces her to him. And she rubs her head into his palm when it is offered to sniff. Then Rambo is tugging on his sneakers, which look like they are spray painted to be one red and one green, and then they're out the door. They spend far longer in the clothing store than Tommy hoped. He initially picked out 7 plain white shirts and a couple pairs of dark jeans before saying he was enough, and they could get this trip over with. He needed to be alone and process why these people, he barely knew, offered to take him shopping. He couldn't keep up with his mask while also trying to process his thoughts at the same time. It was giving him a migraine. But Tubbo insisted they do one more lap around the store, and before Tommy could blink, he was pushed into a changing room with a pile of clothes in his arms, and every color of the rainbow, and some of them in every shade he could imagine, and he was thrown into his face to try them on. Most of them he discarded without actually trying on because the material felt wrong. Others he discarded because he just didn't like the style or color. Somehow, Rambo managed to figure out Tommy enjoyed a couple of sweaters, and regardless of how he denied it, the two of them bought them for him, along with a dozen or so plain t-shirts, several pairs of sweatpants, jeans, and a new hoodie. Tommy put on one of the new sweaters before they walked to an IKEA, much calmer now that he had a nice fabric to feel between his fingers. And her chest was lounging on Rambo's shoulder, flicking her tail lazily, and without a care in the world. But every now and again, and then, he noticed how she'd rub her face against his cheek, or Rambo would reach up and scratch behind her ear, and he tried not to feel jealous that he didn't have a cat to help him feel less nervous. They brought Tommy a set of basic white sheets, a lamp, and a clock before they found a sales associate and ordered a bedside table, a small bookshelf, a desk, and a chair. Tubbo and Rambo also dragged him over to a section full of miscellaneous bar stools, and Tommy tried to tell him that he doesn't need a stool and that he was fine without one. But when Tubbo pushed and insisted he pick one, or else I'll pick one for you, Tommy relented and swiftly picked out a cherry red one that swiveled around. While they were setting up the furniture to be shipped to the Hero Tower, and Tommy was taking a second to drink some water and try to push away the migraine, Tommy noticed the way a woman behind the counter gave them all a look, and he stepped back into hearing range. "Kids, I'm not letting you stick the heroes with all this stuff," she said, sounding very unimpressed. It's not a funny prank." Tubbo instantly puffed up, his ears flicked. He was angry. "We all work there," he gestured to Rambo. "He and I are apprentices." The woman rolled her eyes. "Uh-huh, sure you are." Tubbo clenched his fist, and Tommy could vaguely smell smoke as the go-harbor dug into his wallet. "Now, if you're done fooling around—" "I'm Spitfire," Tubbo exclaimed, slapping an ID on the counter. Then he pointed to Rambo, "and he's Ghost." Tommy's heart started to a stop, and he looked at the ID at the same time the woman did, and they had the opposite reaction. The woman turned bright red and stammered apologies, while Tommy went pale and froze as his eyes were stuck on the ID of the heroes he's never seen before. Tommy, on the other hand, felt like he was losing his mind. These two weren't charity cases. They weren't just unfortunate kids having their lives paid for by Heroes Tower for PR. They were heroes. And Tommy knew their identities. Shit. Tommy knows their identities. His whole job is to find the identities of the heroes and turn them over. But this felt wrong. Tubbo and Rambo's weren't even heroes yet. They were just kids. They're innocent. But he still has to tell the League, right? That's his whole job. They'll be thrilled to have two identities on day one. But... "Tommy," Rambo asked, sounding worried, "you okay?" He didn't respond. He tried, but he couldn't. His mouth just wouldn't work. His mind couldn't form words. He was just in a haze of decisions, struggling to find solid ground somewhere. A sharp but gentle nip on his hand is what brings him back to reality, jolting and stepping back as he struggles to think. Spots is there, wagging his tail and licking his hand, which is currently clenched into a tight fist. Slowly, Tommy forces his hands to relax as he lets the Dalmatian lick the crescent-shaped marks on his palm. Tubbo and Rambo exchange a look, and they quickly finish up the payment. Tubbo lets Tommy hold Slot's leash as they walked out of the shop. None of them said much as they made their way to the nearby bench so Tommy could calm down, take a few drinks of water. And he took his time to think. He really should tell the villains about this, about Tubbo and Rambo. It's his job. It's the entire reason he was sent to the Hero Town in the first place. To find the identities of the heroes and steal their info. Sabotage what he could and when he could. And get out when the time came. But surely the villains didn't need the identities of the apprentices, right? Tubbo and Rambo, they seem so kind. They've been incredibly kind to Tommy. And they've barely known each other for just 5 hours. They're just apprentices. Just kids. They don't need to be dragged into something they have no hands in. With his decision made, Tommy took one last deep breath before he handed the leash back to Tubbo, and Tubbo gave him a concerned look, but didn't say anything. "You guys didn't tell me you were apprentices," Tommy says eventually, his voice strangely hoarse. Tubbo and Rambo shared a slightly confused look. I'm sorry," Rambo said quietly. "I thought you knew." "Yeah, I assumed someone told you," Tubbo agreed with a nod. Tommy shook his head, and I was literally hired today. I don't know anyone's identities. Rambo hesitated, "that a problem?" Tommy shook his head. "No, He glanced around, even looking over his shoulder and squinting into the bush to see if anyone was listening. "I'm an apprentice too, sorry. I don't know. It caught me off guard." "Are you sure that's all?" Tubbo asked, furrowing his eyebrows. Tommy nodded, forcing steady breaths into his nose and out through his mouth. "Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ruin the mood. I don't know what came over me." "Don't apologize," Tubbo scolded lightly, smiling. "I swear, if you're another Rambo, with all the apologies, I'll beat you upside the head." Tommy laughed weakly. "I'll keep that in mind." They sat on the bench for a little while, letting Tommy fully relax and letting his feathers settle fully, and then the three of them set off to get food. Apparently, there's a food truck that sits outside the news tower every evening, and they sell the best milkshakes on earth, according to Rambo. And Tommy, he should be nervous. He should feel anxious and on guard ringing around two be heroes. And he should fall in line, make a mask for the two of them. But just like every other hero, for some reason, he just can't. But could you really blame him? There's just something about the way that Tubbo tries to fight Rambo and take a lactose pill so he can actually enjoy the milkshake without throwing up later, that makes him want to crack jokes and get on Rambo's ass about not fucking up his stomach. And something about the way Rambo eventually tiredly agrees to take a pill under the condition that Tubbo makes mac and cheese for dinner, that Tommy can't stay on guard around. And he decides maybe that isn't such a bad thing. I think that last chapter was pretty great. It really goes into how Tommy's feeling about what's going on and how the heroes are a little suspicious of him for his nervousness, of course. But other than that, I think it's going really well. And I think Tommy's just a little... What is the word I'm looking for? It's going great for him, he thinks, but the heroes are really suspicious of him, and I really want to see where that goes. I feel like that's going to go in a really bad way, or it's going to just completely be ignored by the end of it until the end, something along those lines. But, I think it's time we move on to chapter 4 after a quick break. Break reminder, go get some water, go get a snack. Drink some water, stay hydrated. Stretch your legs, do whatever you need to do, and we'll be right back. Okay, guys, I'm back. We're going to be reading chapter 4 of 4. A Bird Made of Hay. Please remember to go check out the original artist of this fic, Little Bit of Sunny. Let's get started. "What do you think of him?" is what Phil asked when Tubbo and Rambo sat down for the briefing. It was the morning after Tommy was hired, and Carolyn was just had called a quick meeting amongst the top heroes and their apprentices to fill everybody in. This included Tubbo and Rambo. Tubbo wasn't too comfortable talking about Tommy behind his back, especially giving an opinion on the guy when he barely knew him. But when he glanced at Rambo, he had a similarly uncomfortable look. His friend was shifting his seat and picking at his nails, but that was okay. Tubbo could handle this. Hopefully. He's nice, he started, but bit his lip. He's also really nervous. We went out and got him some furniture yesterday. That explains the call I got, Puffy hummed under her breath. And he looked uncomfortable the whole time, like we were getting him clothes. Like no one's ever done that before. Like no one's ever cared enough to take him out to get nice things, Tubbo thinks. And when we handed over our Ds to show we were apprentices, he kind of froze. He chewed way more on his lip, remembering the way Tommy's eyes had gone wide and far away, like his mind was fighting itself to the point where he couldn't do much more than breathe. Fuck, Tubbo doesn't even remember if he blinked before Spot started alerting. Or even Spot started to freak out, and it was... He shook his head, leaning back on his seat with a nervous flick of his ear. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't good. Tubbo felt Rambo's tail brush against his ankle, and he relaxed minutely. He really wished Spots was here. What he wouldn't give to feel his coarse fur in his fingers right now. Androcious was shifting on my shoulders too, like she wanted to jump on him. But I think he might have disassociated, at least a little bit. Or he could have been the start of an anxiety attack, Tubbo murmured, frowning at the table in thought. I couldn't really tell. We wanted to get him out of the store as soon as possible to calm down. Has he said anything to you guys? Ponk asked, leaning forward and frowning with concern, swimming in their eyes. Anything about his mental health? Any that might tell us what might have triggered that reaction? The two of them shook their heads. No, Tubbo said, reaching his hand up and itching the scarred skin on his cheek. He just said he doesn't want anyone in his room under any circumstances. That's all. He looked like he wanted to say more, but Rambo said, keeping his words careful. But yeah, that was all he said. Everyone was silent for a long moment. The whole room was processing the little information the two knew about Tommy, and already they didn't like what they knew. For someone to be that bad this late in life, something must have happened to him. Something that slowly chipped away at whatever personality he had until there was nothing but a husk left. A hollowed-out person without any wants of his own. It made Tubbo's soul ache. I think he just needs time, Puffy said after a moment. Tubbo lifted his gaze to the older gold hybrid, watching as her ears flicked around in thought. He's brand new. He needs time to adjust to this new chapter in his life. Time to get settled, to get to know us. Time to learn he's safe is what she means, but she doesn't say it. But everyone hears it. Tubbo thinks about that for a moment. He thinks about Tommy and how out of depth he seemed during the entire time out in the city. The way he trailed behind the two of them as they walked, like he was meant to be in their shadow. The way his eyes would shift around every store they went into, like he was expecting someone to jump out and grab him. The way he fell into a defensive stance and wings flared out when Spot snapped at him out of whatever days he'd been on. And the way his hands never stopped shaking after the IKEA. And of course, the way he'd practically bolted to his room the moment they got back to the dorm. The way he didn't make a sound all night, like he didn't exist. But of course, there's glimpses of the real Tommy during their outing. The way his eyes would linger on specific clothes and the longing look before glancing away. The shy, secret smile on his face after he changed into a sweater. The way he smoothed out his feathers with careful, trembling hands. The soft smiles and gentle head pats he'd give Spots whenever he thought no one was watching. And the real Tommy was in there somewhere. Tubbo was sure of it. Buried and beaten down till he was nothing but a ghost on the wall is the guy who called Wilbur a boomer to his face. The guy who knocked the wind out of a pro he heard in under 6 minutes. The guy who impressed even Technoblade with his talent. The real Tommy was in there. He just didn't know how to get him back into the sunlight. Tubbo hopes that he and Rambo will be able to ease some of his aches and let him bloom again. It had been a couple days since Tommy was hired, and eventually he's given a temporary ID and a key card so he can move around the tower. Technically, he could have been wandering around the tower this whole time if he wanted to, but to get anywhere, you need a key card. And a key card means Tommy would need someone to be with him to get around. And he really didn't want to interact much with the heroes if he could avoid it. But that's when Tubbo handed him an envelope with a temporary ID and a key card, both with his name on it. To say he was relieved would be an understatement. And the first thing he does, he goes to the gym to train. He gets up early, even before the cafeteria is open for breakfast, changes into a plain shirt and pants, grabs some energy supplements and a water bottle, and heads for the gym. He doesn't really need to train. Not really. He's a villain. He's been training his whole life. He doesn't really have anything he needs to learn. But the pounding of his powers under his skin, making his fingertips feel like he's running his hand through the dry grass, tells him he needs to train just to release some energy. He's been so nervous these last few days to really use his powers, whereas like he used to. And his powers are making its unhappiness at the whole situation known. So at about 4:15 in the morning, Tommy stepped out of the elevator with a deep breath and glances around the starkly lit gym. All the machines were empty, but he expected that much at this time. Everyone's either asleep or still out on a night patrol. But in all honesty, that was perfect for him. He was used to doing most of his training He was used to doing most of his training mostly alone. He couldn't even count how many days and weeks he'd spent alone in the training rooms honing his skills when he was little. The way he'd stay up late into the night and well into the following morning by trying to perfect his abilities. The only time he would train with someone was back when Raptor was teaching him something new. But the last time that happened was long ago, back before he was put on the field. So he does the standard warm-up, stretches near a wall, pointedly ignoring his reflection in some mirror along the far wall, and then hops up onto a bike and starts pedaling to get his blood pumping. He flexes his fingers on the handles as he goes, digging his nails into the foam and focusing on his breathing. His heartbeat is steady in his ears, but it's slowly rising, and that was good. That meant he was actually working, and that he smiled to himself at the thought of getting back into his old routine. He biked for a solid 20 minutes or so and slowly came to a stop to let his heart rate slow back down. Not all the way, but enough to let his system cool off so he's ready for the next task. Tommy drinks a drink from his water bottle, eats a few bites of a protein bar, and slips into one of those private training rooms he's done this demonstration in. It wasn't the same one, but it may as well have been. When the lights flickered on from his movement, the room looked nearly identical to the one he'd been in a few days prior. The only real difference was all the equipment stacked and stored in the corners of the room along the walls. Training weapons were hanging on the walls closest to him, and he wandered over to get a better look with his hands folded behind his back, and there were a few staffs, some clubs, a pair of aluminum swords, and a row of dull throwing knives used in 2 bows, along with some arrows stacked next to the few hay bale targets. Tommy's never really been best with ranged weapons, and he really doesn't feel like getting frustrated right now trying to figure out new equipment. So instead, he turns his attention to the aerial shit they have hanging above his head. There were several swings, even a hammock or two strung up there, which actually looked kind of comfortable. Hoops and rings turned and drifted lazily in place from the air conditioning. There was a tightrope for some reason, and there were some balance beams situated up on the wood rafters. Not bad, Tommy thinks. Some of that actually looked like it'd be a fun challenge, especially the tightrope. But clearly those are for hybrids who could fly. And yeah, maybe Tommy was an avian hybrid, but he couldn't fly. And there didn't seem to be another way up, so he sighed and looked away again. Power practice it is then, and he thinks, and he stretches out of his limbs, which is kind of a shame, since he was hoping to do something with his wings. But power practice was good, too. He could practically feel his telekinesis jumping for joy in his fingertips as he glanced around again. His powers ached for a challenge, something difficult to satisfy the twinge in his fingers, from the lack of the use. For a moment, he considered pulling apart and putting back together the knives, or even stacking every furniture item in the room into a pyramid. Then his eyes land on the hay bale target sitting innocently against the wall, and he gets an idea. Grinning, Tommy drags over the target to the center of the remaining sparring area with his powers, plopping aside it and dancing with his fingers around to check it over quickly. It's been a while since he used powers for something like this, but he's actually kind of looking forward to it. It'll be nice to make something again. With a calculated breath, Tommy closes his eyes and lets powers find the threads connecting the paper target to the hay. With the twitch of his finger, the thread is tugged through holes it was sewn into and is laid into a neat loop beside him on the mat. With his eyes still closed, he floats the paper over to the side and folds it up neatly to be put back on later. Then he started delicately pulling apart the cube of hay into neat bundles, and he made about a dozen or so bundles of hay, barely making a dent in the actual bale, and laid them around himself in a circle to be dealt with later. Usually this is when he'd weave a blanket or something out of hay for pulling it apart and starting over again. This time he was on a bit of a time limit. The heroes would probably be waking up soon and would want their room to practice in, so he had to make something that'd be quick and easy to pull apart, and a blanket would take him too long to pull apart. So instead, he decides something a little more fun, something that requires a little bit more focus, and will allow his powers to flourish, if he only had a brief amount of time. He wanted to stay in the gym till maybe 7 or 7:30, just enough people in here start to wake up and move around. Then he'd retreat back to the room he was staying in and wait for someone to tell him what he's supposed to do. To tell him what they expected of him, so that he could slip on his mask, fall into the role they wanted. But for now, no one was around. He could afford to be a little selfish. A little self-indulgent. Fluttering his eyes open, Tommy guided the bundle of hay to float between his hands and got right to work. A twitch of his thumb to bend the strand away, a scrap of his nail to fold it into the correct shape. A careful wave of his index finger to arch the weaving around into the form he wanted. Every twitch, every flick, every little twinge of his muscles was precise and delicate. As a small bird slowly came into the form of his hands, a cardinal to be exact, one with little wings and even littler beak of innocent, unseeing eyes. Tommy sticks his tongue out a bit to focus better, very carefully tucking a strand of hay in place. And there. He dropped the little bird into his open palms and beams. It's been so long since he used his power to make something so delicate. He used to make plushies when he was little, when he was learning how to focus and the importance of patience. This was no plushie, but it was still nice. With careful fingers, he stroked the back of the little bird with his palm, relishing in the fact that he was able to make something so delicate. He allowed himself a few more minutes of quality fretting of the little bird's appearance, making sure the frayed, sharp ends are all ticked away neatly where they wouldn't be hurt anyone. And then he gently set it aside and brought another bundle in front of him to begin again. This time, he starts making a cow. He bends the hay and weaves it tightly into a vague shape of a head, but then frowns when it doesn't look right. He unwinds it and starts again, furrowing his eyebrows in concentration. He tries to make the image in his head a reality. On his third attempt to make the head of a cow, Tommy pulls it apart with the flick of his wrist and instead starts making a little fish. He wasn't going to be as pretty as the cow could have been, but this was easy. And he really didn't want to be frustrated with his powers for the rest of the day. But then there was a sound of the door opening, and Tommy startled so bad he thinks he dislocated something. With a strangled noise coming from somewhere foreign deep in his chest, Tommy hurtles a bale of hay straight towards the door, and there's a yelp. And someone barrel rolls out of the way, and the hay explodes right against the now closed door. Tommy's on his feet in an instant, and his wings are puffed up in his panic. Breathing heavily as weird noises fall from his lips, his brain feels fogged, and his throat is all sore of a sudden. So he forces himself to stop making noises and think. His eyes dart around the ground where someone dressed in a thick yellow sweater and airy-looking sweatpants was covering their head. A beaten-up duffel bag is on the floor, while a water bottle covered in stickers is currently on the ground, pouring out some fruity-smelling water onto the tile floor. The head of the dark hair lifts up, and brown eyes meet blue, and oh fuck. Tommy looks into the masked but wide and shocked eyes of Everest. Oh fuck, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Tommy scrambles forward, and the hero still crouched on the ground. His mind is in a panic haze, and he stretches out his hands to help him up, or see if he's okay. He doesn't know, and he yanks his hands away for a moment later, just like looking at the hero's shocked expression had burned him. Instead of his fists and hands in his shirt and tucking his wings against his arms to provide some sort of warmth to his oddly stiff limbs, he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to fix this, if he can fix this. Are you okay? Tommy asks, trying to drag himself back to reality. Yeah, Ibra says, his voice barely over a whisper. Tommy winces at his too calm tone, digging his nails into the fabric of his shirt. He knows that tone, the tone that screams he's in trouble, that he'll pay for it later. Tommy watches as slowly Ebris picks himself off the ground. He doesn't look angry. If anything, he just seems surprised, startled even, like he was caught off guard. The hero looks like a pile of loose hay around his feet, looks to his bag and water on the ground, and clears his throat with a nod. Yeah, he says louder this time, but still not angry. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm sorry. Tommy blinks. I what? He laughs, startling, only tightens his grip on his shirt. Why are you saying sorry? I just threw a fucking bale of hay at your head, man. I'm saying I'm sorry because I scared you, Everest shrugged, rolling his shoulders like he's unaffected. Although I think you throwing a bale of hay was a bit extreme, if I'm being honest, he frowned suddenly, nudging the power of his sneaker. Where'd you even get this? Tommy presses his wings together against himself more, and glancing back quickly at the little bird half-finished. A half-finished fish he'd left on the mat. It was One of the targets used for the training bow. I was only using it to practice powers. I swear I was going to put it back. Hey, it's all right. Everett said, his voice soft, hands right up placatingly, like he was trying to calm a wild animal. You're not in trouble. I was just curious. You're okay. Tommy nodded, slowly, trying to calm himself down. He's shaking, he realizes blatantly. His hands are curled up into fists, and they're shaking. He takes a deep breath, and he realizes his chest hurts. His head hurts, everything feels stiff, he's too sensitive. That's probably fine. You okay? Everett asked, stepping forward with a hand outstretched to him. Tommy nods instantly and slowly forces his hands to unclench from his shirt, smoothing out the fabric. The key slips into his pockets and does nothing to shake his hands and limbs. He doesn't soothe the sudden headache he has. It doesn't ease any of the tension lacing through his shoulders, making his feathers prickle with anxiety. But it does help him at least appear more relaxed. Or at least he thought it did. Ebers frowned at him, and Tommy's face flushed with heat. I'll clean up and get out of your hair. Before the hero could respond, Tommy turned on his heel, flicking his wrist to reassemble a bail. He quickly picked up the half-finished fish and pulled it apart as Everest approached him. He quickly added the hay back to the bale. He hesitates for taking apart the bird, though. And apparently he hesitates long enough for Everest to look over his shoulder at it. What's that? He asked in a low tone and casual, as if Tommy hadn't thrown a bale of hay at him not even 2 minutes ago. Looks like a bird. No shit, Tommy mutters, running his thumb over the head of the little thing. It's supposed to be a cardinal. He says it a little bit louder, holding it closer. He feels oddly ashamed showing it off. He doesn't want the hero, his enemy, to see something so vulnerable. Something so innocent. It doesn't deserve to be tainted. It's stupid. Just helps me focus, Helps me get a better perception and shit. He waits for the hero to laugh at him, to smack him on the back of the head, or flick his wings, to call him childish, to scoff and tell him to get rid of it. His eyes ache in anticipation. But then, that's so cool, Everest says in a near whisper. And Tommy whips his head up to stare at the man. He got stars in his eyes, and they're trained on the little bird in Tommy's fingers in pure wonder. Wow. Could I hold it? Sure. In a bit of a haze, Tommy uncovers a little woven statue from his fingers and hands it up to the phantom hybrid, who delicately scoops it up. How did you make this? He hushes. His cheeks heat up, feeling weirdly out of depth, and he shifts his wings and keeps his eyes on the little bird. He doesn't have to look at Edwards in the eye. I just used my powers to make it. It helps with my focus, my patience, and my perception. He shakes his head with a weak laugh. It's stupid, he mutters. It's beautiful, Edwards says, gently running a finger down the weaving's back. Can I keep it? Tommy blinks. You want to keep it? He repeats, and Edwards nods eagerly. If you'd rather keep it, that's okay. You made it after all. But if you don't want it, I'd love it if I could keep it. He sounded excited, hopeful maybe. Hopeful that Tommy would let him keep the stupid little thing he made for practice. Like it was important, like it was something worth keeping. Tommy is so taken aback by the request that he can't do more than just nod silently. Everest just beams, runs over to his gym bag, and gently tucks the little fake bird into a pocket where it wouldn't get crushed. And then picks up his water bottle and lays a towel over the puddle that formed from it. While the hero does that, Tommy swiftly puts the rest of the hay on a bale back. Together, he sews the paper back on as fast as he can manage and tucks it back where it belongs. What are you doing up so early anyway? I'm training, he explains politely, tucking his still trembling hands behind his back. Got used to getting up early to train, right? Edward blinks. Not really, no. He stops because Charon and Peleus usually do their training in the afternoons. I like to do mine early because there's no one around. He trails off and shifts on feet, usually. That's what this was about. He wanted Tommy to leave so he can train in peace. But he's still trying to keep his persona going, so he doesn't want to tell him to get lost. Right, of course. Tommy nodded, slipping on the mask of polite soldier. I apologize. I've interrupted your routine. No. That's not it at all. Everest rushes out, waving his hands in the air and stepping forward like he would physically stop him from leaving. He flinched back instinctively, and the man grimaced. He just took a step back, rubbed at the back of his neck. He stopped like he was thinking of what to say. Tommy stayed silent, his powers practically sparking the tips of his fingers. Never shifted on his feet, looking at him with a strained smile. You're an avian, right? It's a clumsy subject change, but Tommy goes along with it. Doesn't mean he'll give Everest a deadpan look. That doesn't mean he doesn't give Everest a deadpan look. Instead of a very snarky, duh, response, then his head was screaming to say. He lifts a wing and raises an eyebrow at him. Yeah. Everest flushes a gentle shade of blue. Sorry, how's your balance? My balance? Everest nodded. And Tommy shrugged. I mean, it's fine, I suppose. Why? Would you teach me? And Tommy doesn't know what the fuck he's supposed to say that. What? Tommy, he croaks, searching Edward's face for a hint of a joke. Would you teach me? He repeats. My balance is pretty shitty, and I'm not paying if I'm not paying attention. So getting some help would be nice, he clarified, looking weirdly hopeful. He starts, and then he trails off, and Tommy thinks about anything and everything he knows about the Phantom Hybrid. How every article and interview, and even people on Twitter kept saying how charming he was, how nice he was to his fans, and how he'd take pictures with anyone if they asked. How he'd take their phones to get a better picture of people since he was taller than most people, and how he'd go out of his way to help kids and young teenagers whenever he could. Hell, Tommy has read more than a few articles about the one time Everest has personally taken a kid in home from school when his mother was in the hospital. He remembers how easily the hero could charm people with just a few words, how quickly he could read someone and easily slip past whatever walls from people have built up to get on their good side. Tommy's not an idiot. He knows how dangerous Everest really is with that kind of talent. The talent to dig his feathers into the cracks of your soul and rip you apart without a second of hesitation. How his kind smile can quickly turn to a twisted and sinister if you pissed him off. Thankfully, Tommy's had a lot of time to deal with people like that, and people who seem friendly enough to let you trust them before they dig their claws in and squeeze till there's nothing left. So he slips into the role of a bootlicker and swallows thickly before grinning like the most innocent way he could pull off. You're a pro hero. I bet your balance is already perfect. You don't need some apprentice trying to teach you. His attempt to boost Everest's ego fails, and it fails spectacularly. Instead of puffing up with pride like he's expecting, the hero's face drops like a rock in a brief moment before melting into a small, strange smile. Just because I'm a hero doesn't mean I'm the best at everything. And he sat on the bench to untie his shoes. My balance is fine normally. It just takes focus for me to do that. If I'm stressed or distracted, my balance can get thrown off pretty easily. Tommy nodded, trying to keep his bootlicker mask on through his confusion. Phantom Destiny is different from other people, right? Egbert nodded. Yep, the closest equivalent is an avian. And since we don't have another Phantom Hybrid in the tower, he trailed off looking at Tommy expectantly. He shifted his wings. Wouldn't Chiron have taught you that? He asked, not really understanding why he wanted him, of all people, to teach him. He's an avian hybrid, too. He's shorter than me by more than 6 inches, he explains, stretching out his legs and popping his ankles. It means he can't teach me properly. He taught me the basics, of course, but it's not the same. You and I are closer than height. You'd be able to teach me better. Based on his tone and insistence, Tommy knew Everest wanted the answer to be yes. Of course he'd want a yes. He's a hero. He'd probably never had anyone tell him no since he joined the academy. In that simple fact, he takes a deep breath and remembers several things at once. His anxieties don't matter. His thoughts don't matter. It doesn't matter if he's nervous about being responsible for teaching somebody. It doesn't matter if the thought of needing to be correct to someone with the same harsh words he'd received in training made him stick to his stomach. No, none of that mattered because Tommy is here for a job and he agreed to do whatever it takes to get it done. So, after he released the breath he didn't realize he was holding, he thought a bit. I guess I could try. Like he predicted, Everest beamed. Great. What's the first step? He faltered a bit, blinking. Oh, you mean right now? Yeah, I was supposed to train with you today anyways. But there wasn't a specific time, and since we're both here, he shrugged. Oh, right. He shifted his wings a bit and with a nod. Yeah, all right. Great, Everest said, clapping his hands cheerfully. Let's go get started, yeah? Tommy finished up his training with Everest around 8 a.m. The hero invited him to go to breakfast, but Tommy turned him down in favor of staying in the gym a bit longer. He cleaned up the private room and did some wing exercises. He hit a puncture jag, jogged on the treadmill for a bit while staring out the window at the mountains in the distance. They didn't have too much snow on them at this time of the year, but they were still pretty to look at. Especially in the midday light, it made the little amount of snow on the peaks sparkle. A little after 11, when Tommy finally leaves the gym, he's exhausted and hungry, and as he's waiting for the elevator, he debates on if he should go to the cafeteria. He wants to, of course, but that would mean he'd have to interact with people. It'd mean he'd have to put on another mask and be cheerful and lively so they'd like him, and he wasn't really sure he had the mental energy for that. But, of course, the universe decided he didn't have a choice. Hey, a voice calls, and Tommy looks up before he can even think. There's a man jogging towards him with a towel slung over his shoulder, and a white strip of fabric keeping his dark hair away from his eyes. He had a flame-patterned mask covering his eyes, and he saw soot-stained horns poking out from his head. The man approached him slowly, but didn't seem suspicious. More than anything, he just seemed confused with an even friendly smile on his face. Who are you? I don't think I've seen you around before. Oh, I'm Tommy, he nodded politely, anxiously picking his new shirt and praying the elevator to come faster. I'm new. Tommy? The guy frowned on thought, lit up and then lit up and beamed like a kid on Christmas. Wait, isn't the new apprentice Tommy Mockingbird? Tommy was a bit surprised. His name was already familiar enough for the general heroes that he'd be recognized, but he nodded. The presumed hero beamed even brighter. Oh, finally, I thought Hypnos and Mirage were just bullshitting me. He stuck a hand out. I'm Soulfire. Instantly, Tommy straightens up at the name. How would he not recognize him? Of course, he wasn't in full costume, but anyone could recognize his signature headband from miles away. How tired was he that he didn't recognize a member of the Dream Team? Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I didn't recognize you. Soulfire laughed, but it was a warm, hearty thump from the shoulder. Gods, please, do not call me sir. Just call me Soulfire, for now. I swear I'm not that old. That, for now, made something uneasy roll in Tommy's gut. But he gave the hero a strange smile. Of course, Soulfire. Sorry. He shrugged, tossing a towel into a bag on his back. Don't worry about it. The elevator dinged. Tommy shoved from the elevator with Soulfire beside him. He held his wings close to his back. Now they wanted to be touched again. But then, before he could hit the button to the floor, the door was on. The hero spoke. Want to join me and my friends for lunch? I think Ghost and Spitfire will be there, too. Instinctively, Tommy glanced at the hero and searched for the answer he wanted. When he saw a hopeful gleam in his dark eyes, a small grin on his face, he was relieved to actually get a clear answer from him. He didn't like it, but at least he knew what the man wanted. He could slip into that role. Sure. He predicted Soulfire brightened up, hit the button for the fourth floor, and Tommy shifted his wings, smoothing out the underside and puffing them up to lay them as flat as possible. They looked semi-presentable. He looked like a wreck since he basically been in the gym for nearly 6 hours, but Soulfire didn't seem to mind. He knew Tubbo and Rambo wouldn't say anything, so hopefully Mirage and Hypnos wouldn't either. And if they didn't mind, he could excuse himself early if he needed to. Soulfire was typing away on his phone, a small smile on his face with his thumb raised across the screen. Tommy smoothed out his shirt, keeping Soulfire in his peripheral vision as he continued trying to make himself look presentable. The hero stayed in focus on his phone the entire elevator ride, and only put it in his pocket when they dinged and stepped on their way towards the cafeteria. Got any allergies? It's going to be pretty busy, so I'll grab you something while you sit with everyone else. He cleared his throat. I can't eat a ton of meat aside from fish, and I can't eat eggs on their own. But otherwise, no. Tommy said, shuffling his wings back to fold down as small as they could go against his back. He nodded with a thoughtful hum. Cafeteria's always got wraps and salads and shit, so you might like that. Otherwise, I think it tastes special as grilled sandwiches. Can't remember. Tommy nodded silently and followed along behind him with his hands folded behind his back. There were a lot of people milling around, some in business suits and others in hoodies and casual day clothes. A couple were in PJs, and someone off in the corner was wearing a unicorn onesie. Several people wore plain masks to cover their eyes or mouths, marking them as heroes. In Tommy's mind, as they sat and talked in small groups, it was almost violently casual, even for a cafeteria. Heroes and staff sitting and chatting together like they're on the same level. Tommy's eyes looked over to see Tubbo waving at him frantically, a wide grin on his face, and one visible eye scrunched up in delight. Roger and Hypnos were sitting across the table from him, and Rambo at his side, looking like he'd rather sink into the floor. Tommy laughed weakly, relaxing a bit as he walked over to seat and took a seat beside Tubbo. Tommy, there you are. I haven't seen you all morning. Where have you been? He shrugged, taking a seat beside the goat hybrid. At the gym. All morning, Rambo frowned. We didn't see you leave. He shrugged again, itching his chin, flexing his fingers. I like to get an early start. Tommy stretched, missing the looks from the rest of the table, shared before Soulfire left to go grab his food. So Rambo was shuffled around for a bit, and Tommy was passed some fruit-infused water with a fancy logo on it. He shot him a grateful smile before taking a swig of it. It was cold, and sent a satisfying shiver down his spine and helped ease the tension in his wings. Tommy stayed silent as Tubbo and Rambo talked with Mirage and Hypnos. Well, mostly Mirage. Hypnos was resting his head on his arms like he was ready to take a nap there and then. And honestly, Tommy's tempted to follow his example. So much so that he lays his head down on the table and searches around the room with his powers. He just wants something to fiddle with, that's all. There's something small he can drop back on the floor without anyone noticing. He closes his eyes and searches around the room for anything small. Shoelace that's attached to somebody. Zipper, nope, that's someone's backpack. A spider hiding in the corner? Nah, he's just chilling. A drop sock? Gross. Oh, under the table is a pen. That's perfect. With a twitch of his fingers, Tommy's rolled open his eyes. He's held up his shoe up to catch the rolling pen before lifting up to grab it. No one seemed to notice, so he fiddled with the pen in his hands on the table. Sophie returned a few minutes later and set a small cardboard box in front of him with the words black bean plus avocado written on the top in Sharpie. He set the other boxes in a tray with a bowl of pasta in front of Mirage, sitting down across from Tommy at the table. I hope that's all right, Sophie asked, sounding oddly nervous. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I tried to get something with a decent amount of protein since you had just got out of the gym. Oh, that was strange and nice of him, taking account that Tommy just spent his entire morning at the gym, that he'd need the protein and energy to continue throughout the day without collapsing. He nodded. This is good, thank you. He flipped open the lid and pulled out the wrap. It looked really good. The lettuce looked clean, crisp, and fresh, and the tortilla shell was green. He couldn't remember what that meant, but he knew it tasted good. A lot of wraps that Raptor made had green shells, and those always tasted the best. So he picked it up, took a big bite, humming contentedly to himself as flavor exploded across his tongue. He watched Sulfur, Mirage, and Tubbo and Rainbow around him. Hypnos was practically inhaling his noodles, and Tommy was content to eat his own lunch slowly as he drifted in and out of the conversation. Tubbo was talking about the need to pick up spots from the groomers in a couple hours, and Sulfur offered to walk with him. Eventually, his focus receded his own mind as he ate the second half of his wrap. He doesn't recall ever having avocado before. But if it was anything like the spread that coated the inside of the tortilla, then he might have to have it more often. It was creamy and savory and hit him in a way that made the back of his teeth crave more. What about you, Tommy? Tommy asked suddenly, making him jump back to the present, nearly choking on his bite. Huh? Your costume. Have Warden or Lotus talked to you about it yet? He repeated, smiling at him. He shook his head. No, not yet. Are they supposed to? Tommy frowned. Usually he and Lotus come up with designs for you and pick through after a few days, especially since your trial patrol is usually a week or two before you're hired. After you're hired. Tommy choked on his food the second time. First, a week? Mine was only a week after I was hired, Tubbo explained. Rambo nodded. I think mine was 2 weeks because Chiron was on sick leave. Oh, he blinked back. I was watching down the bite with a rapper. Who will my first patrol be with? Chiron, probably. Mirage is itching the porcelain mask. You're both Avery and hybrid, so we'll probably take you out for rooftop patrol since those are pretty quiet. How the hell is that going to work, Tommy thinks, but doesn't say anything. Instead, he just nods and fiddles with his pen, which was now on the table. As the group keeps talking, Tommy starts to doodle on a napkin. He starts small little mushrooms and bees and birds on the corners, and then he starts to doodle some cool little looking gloves, ones with extra grip on the fingers and a cool pattern on the fingers to make them look like claws. Then he doodled boots, ones with silver tips, and he could grab the winter walls better, and extra padding on the bottom to cushion his landings. That's what really got him thinking. If he could make his own outfit, what would it look like? Even as a villain, he doesn't get to pick his own costume. He has a uniform. Raptor is his branch leader, and Tommy's not important enough to get a customized disguise. He assumes the heroes would be the same, but still. He can't help but think about what the costume would look like if he was the one designing it. If he had full control over his costume, and what would it look like? For one, he'd want to have red on his to match his wings. Red accents stitched into the cuffs of the shirt, jacket, red boots that glow under a black light, or even a red bandana to keep his hair out of his face. Or maybe even his mask could have red on it. Red and gold and white. Like on a plague doctor mask with a shorter beak. Like a songbird. That'd be nice. He thinks that as he doodles eye holes of the mask. So distracted and lost his mind, Tommy doesn't know the way Tubbo and Rambo keep glancing at the napkin before looking at each other excitedly. Tommy doesn't see how Sulfur looked excited as well, and noticed what he noticed on the napkin. In fact, he only looked up when Hypnos shifted, stretched his arms out with the yawn, hiding the napkin away under his hands. Hero itched his nose. I'm gonna go take a nap, he declared, stretching out more. Tommy, walk with me? Oh, of course, Hypnos. And Tommy stood, balling up the napkin and throwing it out with his box. Hypnos tucked into his pockets, waiting for him as Tommy waved to the rest of the table He waved to the rest of the table, and he followed him to the elevator. That was chapter 4. I loved that chapter. It was amazing. It really got into Tommy's designs. It really got to his mind and what he was thinking. It also got into what Tubbo and Rambo were thinking. pretty clearly. It also showed how much skill he has with his power in that one scene. Like, he made that little bird. That is so cute. I would love a little hay bird. That'd be so adorable. But yeah, I love this chapter. Don't forget to check out the original creator. Drop some comments on what else you want me to read. Hit some likes so you let me know you like this series. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to get notified to see more of these videos when they come out. I may not post every day. I may post twice in a day. I don't know. But these videos take so long to upload that it does take me a while. So if I don't have time in the day, I just can't do it. Just a reminder, don't forget to check out the original creator. She is they are awesome. I love their fics. They're a really great writer, though sometimes they are human. There are flaws in writing, of course. I have a flaw in speaking, apparently. I could not speak this time. But you all have a great day. Don't forget to drink water, and I'll see you guys next time. Ray out.